So first introduction, my name is Lee Quessenberry, and I am a developer for Robert Half and a contractor through Esteemed. I'll be contracting for the next 2 days, and I've become a full-time Robert Half developer on Monday. So that's not the right one. Got to go to GitLab. And last week or 2 weeks ago, we went through kind of the what, when, where, why, and how of using PatternLab. And if you were here last time, basically the what is atomic design, which is something that I was introduced to as early as like 2016 or something, somewhere along those lines at DrupalCon. And I didn't use it a whole lot in practice just because I had a lot of smaller clients that they didn't really care. I was the designer. I was also the developer and also the one that was designing all the specs and all that good stuff. But where this atomic design philosophy really shines, and this is kind of the reason I wanted to ask Wendy to come aboard. I put her on the spot, and the reason why is that we serve very different roles at where we work at Robert Half. Wendy and I both have a lot of overlap with oh, okay. Ricky's on his way. Sorry, I just got a notification. Anyway, we have a lot of overlap in our skills, but there are certain things that me coming from a Drupal background and Wendy coming from purely a different kind of front end development background, there were some skills that we didn't have in common. And the other factor in this is that neither of us are the designers of the theme that we're integrating right now. So coming from a craft website environment where I was doing websites for small companies and jumping aboard with Robert Half, it became very apparent that every person on the team has a job, a very important job, and the atomic design philosophy, we leverage that every day in a way that makes it effective, from our design team to our front end development team, and then through implementation with our back end team. And if you want to kind of get a review on atomic design, I have a repo here that I will share, my public repo that's absolutely trashed right now, but it's a work in progress. In the documents, I reference what atomic design is and what PatternLabs are. And these are from the author, Brad Frost, and he goes into a lot of the, sorry, my dog's growling, she's really mad. It goes into a lot of the philosophy behind it. I don't intend to just sit here and dwell on that. That's something that I think everyone here can consume and understand over time. But PatternLab is the tool of the trade that we've chosen to use. Now there are other frameworks you can use for, I think one's called Storyboards, which I've not got any experience with. We're going to stick to PatternLabs today. When to use it, like I said, there's a good article here that I've linked, but basically when to use PatternLab. I think PatternLab is best used when you have a team that has different departments, different roles, if you've got a marketing department that's passing the design off to the development department, PatternLab is really good there because it ties the gap between developer and designer, and it gives you a visual aid that you can share. I can't even tell you how many times in the last several weeks that I've taken screenshots of the XD file, compared it to screenshots of the work in progress in development, and sent those to our designer to get more input on whether I'm going the right direction or not, or interpreting the specs the right way. And it just makes things so much easier because you do have a living, breathing front end tool that isn't necessarily, you don't have to write all of the code in Drupal to make something on the front end. You can kind of bootstrap it or basically create the components and as the front end developer, you're agnostic to what's needed in Drupal. That doesn't mean that you just write sloppy code and then pass it off to the backend team and say, here are the variables, good luck. There's also a lot of communication between our front end developers and our backend developers who are seasoned Drupal backend developers, and they know what, they know what data is available to Drupal at certain times, and kind of like what tokens are available or what variables are available at render time and that sort of stuff. And so it also allows us to work with them, bridging that gap and bringing things a lot closer to home, which is still something very different for me because I'm used to heading all three of those roles, from design to front end to integration in the back end. And that gives me a unique perspective, but at the same time, I'm allowed to delegate some of the work and not have to sweat it out so much in the details. So one of the other things, oh gosh, sorry guys, my dogs are excited. Sally.
I want to give my perspective. Hi, I'm Wendy Robles, and I have been working at Robert Half for 5 years now. My background is more like a front end. I don't have much experience in Drupal, but I have good experience in front end in general. This is the first time that I work in a project with this methodology and atomic design. Personally, when I looked and I read all the articles about this, it looked for me a good way and an ordered way to handle the front end and a better way to collaborate with the back end. In comparison with the previous one that we had in the previous project, where we were just taking care of some of the UI and how it looks, but we are not any involved on how the things were working. We would just have to style and make everything look like a mockup, but all the rendered tags that were there, and we have to figure it out on how to make it look like the mockup. In this methodology in atomic design, I feel like in front-end part, we have like more opportunity to control and generate the right code, perhaps cleaner code that makes sense to have a UI that is closer to the mockup, and also handle with these variables. We can understand a little bit better how the component it's going to react and how the component works in the backend. And also something that I really like it is that it's much more organized, in my opinion, than the way we used to work, which is only more based on pages than in this case that is more building blocks and have a this clean list of have our code organized by small blocks and smaller and bigger and bigger and bigger, and you can compose with those atoms and molecules. Just my perspective.
Thank you. You saved me too. I got to mute the dogs, so thanks for that. And that's really what I wanted to hear is the testimony from Wendy on our specific project, because it's new to her as well, and I'm somewhat familiar with it just because I kind of jumped on the train a little early back in like 2016 or something like that, but I never really used this effectively in practice. And so for a lot of us on the team, this is our first go at this. So we're by no means experts, but we have about 6 months of experience now developing our current projects with it, and it's helped us tremendously. To review, where do you install PatternLab? Generally, you just install it on your local machine, but with the way that we are using PatternLab, we're using a module called components, which actually allows us to access the PatternLab twig components directly within our Drupal theme. Now, this is something that early on wasn't really done across the board. People would use PatternLab and have it separately installed on a different instance, like maybe a local machine or perhaps a staging server just for PatternLab. And the PatternLab spits out basically the twig code that you would then copy or rewrite into your theme. But using Drupal's components module, we're actually allowed to use includes, imports, and extends of the twig that's written in PatternLab once, and it eliminates the need to copy or duplicate code over into templates in Drupal, which is actually a pretty cool thing that we set up early on. And I'm going to attempt to show a little bit of that in practice with my local machine. We're going to maybe create a logo or use the logo that's with the canned PatternLab and render it on the screen in Drupal. So I'll get into that in just a sec. And yeah, that's the how. So that's where we are. We're towards the end of my little introduction. I went over most of this in my last presentation, but now I'd like to kind of work together on this because I broke a lot of this code prior to this, and see if we can get just a simple block with our site name or our logo in the header region and have it derived from PatternLab. So to give you an idea of what a PatternLab installation looks like, this is a fairly old installation of PatternLab that I used as a base. It's node package managed. So I have all of the package.json files included in the theme. All you have to run is a quick npm start command, npm run start. I've already compiled it to use grunt as the processor, basically the task runner. And I won't get into a lot of the details on that, but you should be able to pull down my repo from GitLab and kind of see how that all is intertwined. One thing that PatternLab doesn't assume is anything of your workflow. So it doesn't come with gulp, it doesn't come with grunt, it doesn't come with any of that sort of stuff. So you kind of have to configure a little bit of that on your own. There are some recipes for Drupal in particular, but I don't believe we use that. I think we use the base Twig version of PatternLab, and because the Drupal version was just, I mean, it just not really it wasn't much of an advantage for us to use it. But there are no assumptions with PatternLab. It is what it is, and it renders on its own. It's basically its own website. So from the top, we'll let's see. I'll go to the main PatternLab here, and as you can see, this is just boilerplate. This is pretty much out of the box. You can define your colors, which I obviously didn't define these because they're all primary colors. Your fonts, your animations, everything in the components are called atoms, the smallest parts. So you'll see them down here on a list. You've got your globals like colors, fonts, animations, visibility, etc., text, and so on. And then these atoms are combined to create molecules. So if you'll notice here under text, we've got molecules for the author name or an address, if you wanted to use an address in a block somewhere, or your headings, groups, if you want to do mains and subheadings. Basically, it's just a combination of the simple atoms that are written over here, and all of the styling is implied. Now, one extra thing that we did with our project, and I've done with my own project here, is to set up Grunt to look for a SAS file inside of each folder for each one of these elements. And then it compiles all of those together into one style sheet that we actually directly use in the Drupal theme. So when you compile the styles for PatternLab, the way we have it set up is you're also compiling the styles for Drupal. And I'll show a code example of that in just a few minutes. And then you go on to organisms. Organisms are like your header and footer. And generally, organisms are used around at about the same, they're used to create entire blocks or entire paragraphs in Drupal. So if you're using the paragraphs module, you would include one of these organisms, which then in turn includes all of the molecules and atoms that make it up. And you can pass variables through that organism all the way down through molecules and atoms to get, if you wanted to change like a style, or in our case, we actually wrote a bunch of SVGs to use for like icons and stuff. And the case was that we needed to change the fill color for certain instances. Like if we wanted to have a white magnifying glass or an orange one or a blue one, we actually have one SVG that represents every magnifying glass on the website. And then we use variables that are passed to it to either assign a fill color or assign a certain style class in CSS to it, which is pretty sweet. Rarely do we ever get up to the templates and pages level of PatternLab. These are more meant for reference for the designer, so that the designer can see, okay, here's what the page layout looks like. And it's just a culmination of everything below it. As far as using this directly in Drupal, we don't really get past the organisms stage, because Drupal allows you to use blocks and bricks and paragraphs and whatever your favorite site building or layout builder tools require. So we never get above that level, but it doesn't hurt to have templates or pages. Like the blog here I don't think it has anything. Let's see. Yeah, that one's not finished, but The homepage is finished. And if you wanted to create layouts for the designer for approval, uh, they would be able to use the templates and pages to review and see that everything looks good. Um, there's a little, differentiation there when you're considering integrating it with Drupal versus just showing your front end styles. And let's see.
Do you think maybe templates and pages, it's levels that perhaps can be used more for Drupal's projects that are fully, maybe those are more applicable for fully decoupled
Yes,
projects? So I, with the experience that we have working with PatternLab, I feel like the templates and pages are which are the higher levels in PatternLab, are more applicable for projects where it's fully decoupled. Yeah,
right.
versus the other option where it's not fully decoupled. It has another name,
Yeah,
but
no,
it's not
the
fully decoupled.
headless Drupal, or like a
Yeah.
hybrid of
Yeah.
headless Drupal.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And Ricky, I think you could chime in there as well, because you do a lot of React development. So what's your take on that? You've seen it from the outside. You've seen Wendy and me and JG and all the rest of the team. What's your take on using PatternLabs higher than the organisms level for like the JavaScript type stuff?
Yeah, I think Drupal has already a lot of these built-in things, as you were saying. So like you can build like your own like blocks and you can build your own pages kind of thing. So I haven't had too much experience outside of that, but I have seen PatternLab being used like more as in like if you want to create like quick templates to show like designers and stuff. Like I've seen use cases for that more than anything. But yeah, I think as far as like code reusability, keeping your code dry, probably once you reach like the organisms level, it's just up to the designer and then like mixing it up with like whatever Drupal comes with out of the box. But yeah, I don't have too much else to say. Like I haven't used it in a React project, for example. But yeah.
And I know that the way that we handle JavaScript now is to include small snippets of JavaScript, like for jQuery stuff, for example, small snippets of maybe a couple of functions within the component that it's being used, and then that's later appended and compiled into one JavaScript file, which is also really nice if you're calling the JavaScript using your Drupal your info file for your theme. You can use the JavaScript directly. Of course, all of Drupal's rules with using jQuery still apply. Like if you go and grab something that says document ready and paste it in there, it's not going to work. You have to change it to explicitly tell it that it's jQuery, and then it will work. But those are just Drupalisms basically when it comes to JavaScript. I'll show you guys what I have so far, what I broke, and we can try to create just a very simple, maybe even I'll pull in just the logo and we can go from there. I don't have a whole lot. Actually, I might just show some of the code while we're doing this. I got to move this screen from the thing that comes with Team Zoom. It's always in my way. All right, so what a mess. Okay, this is a good starter, and I will zoom in so people can see. I'll close these terminals. The way the components module works, this is my Drupal 9 PatternLabs theme that I've created. And I've also set up libraries for it as well. But as you can see, this looks a little bit different than your normal Drupal theme. If you're familiar with info files for your themes, you're not generally going to see component libraries in any mainstream theme, but the components module actually allows us to map custom paths to specific twig templates that we're basically using in our PatternLab. It maps them, and then we can use them. So for instance, this one we call base. We've mapped it to our atoms, and we've got one called components that we've mapped to our molecules, which are just a step above atoms and use a combination. Then I've got one called layouts for organisms. You know, I could actually call this atoms, molecules, organisms, but it just depends on how you want to name it. And then to templates and pages and so on. So if you wanted to use any of the twig within those components, you can. And I'll show you in the file location, those are located. You've got to, so here's our theme folder, D9PL, and we have a components folder, and then there should be a templates folder, but I've not written any templates for this just yet. So this is bone stock, no assumptions made. It actually kind of burned to me because I was trying to use some templates from another parent theme and broke things. So I just, I said, we'll just start from scratch. But the components folder here is where we've installed our PatternLabs. Our PatternLab has its own composer file, and when it runs, when you run the in our theme, you'll notice that we have a package JSON file and PatternLab config file and a package lock file for the packages. So basically, whenever we get ready to run our PatternLab, we have our grunt file set up to have certain tasks. They're mapped here at the bottom. One of them is just compile. We've got a default, which just compiles the PatternLab, and then a compile one that does our SAS and some code uglification. And we've also got PatternLab Watch. PatternLab Watch actually compiles and then watches for changes, and then PatternLab Serve, which watches for changes and also serves the PatternLab into the browser using browser sync. And so these are all things that I've set up and I can demonstrate right now. So let's see, we'll go to terminal. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate to our theme folder. And once I'm there, I'm going to run npm run start. And that's going to run through the package file that I showed you. It will give you a few messages. I've cleaned it up as much as I can to get rid of deprecated packages. And then boom, it opens up PatternLab in the browser. So all of that has already been set up. Excuse me. Anyway, all of that's already been set up, and you can see it running here. That part is fairly extensive. Did all of that from scratch. There are a few themes in the wild, like a good one that I know, I believe it's called Gesso. I believe Gesso uses PatternLabs now. I'm not 100%. Yeah, PatternLab, SAS, NPM, and Gulp. So if you wanted to do this with a more out of the box treatment and not have to uh, build your own PatternLab, there is an option for that. It's called Gesso. But I wanted to try to see if I could reproduce as much of this as possible. And it also uses the components library module. So maybe if you wanted to kind of get started, Gesso might be like a good way to get started using PatternLabs, more so than my broken code. The reason that we didn't use Gesso in the first place at Robert Half is just because it has a lot of extra stuff in it that we determined that we didn't need for our use case, but it's not a bad way to go. So yeah, it'll run localhost and all that good stuff. And then of course I'm using Lando. So I'm going to split my terminal here and move this away. I've built this to use Lando. You can use any local environment you want, but my repo has a Lando YAML file that's already set up to go, which would build the site for you. And here's what we have so far. There's nothing there. So what we're going to try to do today is create a block. So what I'm going to do is just a very simple custom block type. I'm just going to call it a PatternLab component. Okay. You can do anything you want here. I just want to kind of give you guys just a very elementary, rudimentary understanding of what we're doing. Manage fields. This since you can actually put as many fields as you need to in here. But for the simplicity of what we're trying to do, I am going to use no fields at all and just use Twig to include some of the patterns. If you wanted to make fields that are available for your PatternLab component, say maybe you wanted to use menu items, or maybe you wanted to include some sort of an entity, you can use fieldable or entities that are fieldable, and those values would be exposed to that block and then available as variables for your block to pass into the PatternLab. For now, I just want to get a simple pattern rendered on the screen, and I'm going to call it directly with no variables. And I don't really need the body field for that. So we'll go ahead and delete that. And yes. I'm going to add a custom block, a PL component. I'm going to call this site logo. I'll make it available in the header region. I guess in all places. And just so we can see that it's been placed, I'm displaying the title of it. Obviously, if you want to not have the title on there, you can turn that off. And I'm going to look back at our site. Okay, there's our site logo block. Okay, so if I inspect that, I can see that my suggested file name here, it would most likely we would want to use site logo HTML as our twig file. And so what I'm going to do is copy that and go over to my theme. I'm going to add a new folder called templates, which should have come with the theme, but I started from scratch. And I'll add a new folder called blocks. And in the blocks folder, I'm going to add a new file called block site logo html.twig. And just so we know that it's actually using this, I'm just going to put a span here for now, for world. Save it. Oh, look at me using the wrong tags. I'm going to go ahead and clear my cache just because keep calm, clear cache. That's pretty much my motto with Drupal. Whoops. And once we do that, I'm going to go ahead and reload the page. Hopefully we'll get a hello world message. All right. So since we've created our own block, that's a lesson in itself. We've actually created a custom block template using no template at all and just created a span tag there. So that block can be placed anywhere on the website. And now what I'm going to do is actually pull, let's see, I'm going to try to pull it from the system because I can't remember where hold on. Block.html. I don't even remember where that's actually located. Anybody remember where the actual default block twig is in Drupal?
What's your base thing? You have a base thing?
I don't believe so. I can look.
You could pull one out of one of the core themes. Right?
Yeah, I'll just pull it out of Claro or something. Good call. Well, I guess I don't have a base theme. Wait a minute. Doesn't seem right. There we go. I'll pull it out of Bart. How about that? So in your normal block twig, you're going to have all the things that you need for the title and all that good stuff. And basically, you get down to here, and this is where your block content is. So what we're going to try to do is use this as an example. I don't need all that. My mouse is really sensitive. And here where the content is, obviously we still need our content, but what I'm going to do is try to make an include to one of the other templates that we have, and you guys are going to see me majorly screw up stuff. We'll look at one of the other. I can't ever remember. Oh, actually, no. I'm in the wrong spot. Let's go to components, source, and one of our molecules should have us a good. Oh, no. Don't use any. They're not using any. Let's go to an organism. Maybe there'll be something. Got to include or not. There we go. Okay, so this should have been the one I used anyway. Let's just say I want to use the twig. That I'm going to go ahead and just take this include here. This is hack and slash, so not recommended. And I'm going to paste that there and just see if we can get a logo to show up. And then you guys can kind of see how that's connected. Now, I got a feeling that it's going to mess up because I don't think I actually have mine called atoms in my includes. I think I actually have it called base. So let's see if it'll throw. Go ahead and clear cache and see if it'll throw an error. Yep. Okay, so it says it's not defined, but I actually know that it is defined, just not defined as atoms. So if you'll notice in my theme block, or sorry, everything's giant. I'm trying to have it present where you guys can see it. I'm used to small. So I've actually called this base. So my namespace is base. So what I'm going to do is change that to change that to base. In fact, I might rename everything in my info file so that it's more compatible. I might rename all of that to atoms and molecules and all that good stuff. This is a very experimental early project. I don't intend to do anything except teach with this repo, so we'll see what happens. Hopefully we get a logo image. You get a broken image. Well, that's good. That's better than nothing. Aha, okay. So that makes sense. The image is in a different location. But as you can see, we've extended Drupal's theming to where we can include patterns from other places. So one thing you could do here is set a variable that looks for, say, let's say we added an image field to this block type, right? And what we could do is set a variable in Twig that replaces the source for the image with a Twig variable. And we could actually pass the field value for that image. And that would give us our logo, or our actual, have an actual not broken image there. That might be a little too involved. We only got about 11 minutes left, but I basically wanted to show you guys that we can extend Drupal to use things from PatternLab. Actually, if you want to see, like, I know this is quick and dirty, but let's take something out of that header file, wherever it went. Say I wanted to put the whole pattern for that header in there, or at least some of the stuff. I guess I could just take out any of these, or I could actually include the actual header file. So let's see what that does. I know this is like terrible code, but just kind of want to show you guys how easy it is to extend. So our header is under organisms, which is actually layouts. So let's see, layouts. Hopefully that, I mean, it's going to be really busted looking, but we should still be able to see it try to render something. And yeah, I thought I spelled that or did something wrong there. So let's go back to.
Lee,
Really
would it make sense to rename your namespaces in the theme?
Yeah, I
to
was just
align?
saying the same thing in my head, like,
Yeah.
but this is, yeah, you get the idea. This is just a very rudimentary kind of workout. Okay, patterns, O2, organism. Oh, I see what I did wrong. Okay. Patterns, organisms, so layouts. Yeah, that should have worked, but I'll take a look at it again. Yeah, you're totally right about that. I don't know. I got something goofed up here, looks like. Yeah, that should work. Because there's images,
Go forwards instead of 0, 0.
and then logo.twig. Now let's just add maybe so that was base. So base is atoms. Molecules is tab. The components, and layouts is organisms. So yeah, it should. Now I've got a typo somewhere, but you guys kind of see where I'm coming from with this, and I'm obviously going to improve what I've got here to be a more complete theme. I'll go back to the header. Let's try one of these, see if I can get the nav to show up. Molecules is, does it keep closing that file? Molecules is component. Oops. See if that breaks. I'm sure it will. That's why I wanted to keep it simple and just show the logo, nothing too fancy. But I wanted to show all original code because I didn't want to show anything that we're working on at Robert Half due to NDA. If I get my load this time. Hey, there we got a menu. And of course, we would pass menu items to that. These are actually being pulled directly from PatternLab. But what you would do is create a loop that iterates through, just like you would do any other menu block, iterates through each item, and then each item would be passed to that pattern to show the right menu link. And we have some more advanced examples of that on our project, but I haven't gotten permission to show any of that yet. So I wanted to keep it with original code and show you guys kind of where I'm at. I kind of want to open up to questions if you guys don't mind. I apologize that this was a little less interactive than I hoped, but I hope some of you learned something here today. If anything, you may have learned not to use Pattern Labs. I don't know. I like it. So does anybody have any questions?
I think the
Yes.
name, sorry,
Go ahead.
I was going to say that the namespace concept is, you know, I can see how that would be useful. I see where you wanted to go with that, sort of rename it in your own sort of semantics. It does open up that question though about how well supported you are on the internals to do that. So what's your understanding of that right now? I'm a bit confused by what happened there, but what's your understanding of it? Like if you want to use those different section names instead of the original atoms, molecules, etc., do you have to also rename things inside those inner templates that are in those different sections?
Not within PatternLab itself.
Within, okay.
It's intelligent enough. There may be some configuration if you wanted to like customize it in a way. The namespace thing was kind of mixed up because of the Drupal side of things. I had kind of mashed together an old project that I was working on with some of the stuff that I had been working on currently, and so I had basically gotten some of the language interchanged, like base for atoms and that sort of stuff. And generally, it's atoms, molecules, organisms, and
Templates and pages.
yeah, they get really unoriginal after the third level. They're just like, once you're an organism, I don't know. I think it should be like sentient or something. I don't know, sentient being, or I don't understand that nomenclature too much, which is kind of why base and components made more sense for me at the time. But yeah, get your namespaces right, or otherwise you look like a complete fool like I just did in front of all of your friends. Our namespaces aren't mixed up like that on our real projects. This was basically a sandbox that I wanted to share with everybody. I share my experience. Oh, of course, it's not barking right now.
So I had a question just in terms of going forward. Are there any preferred video blogs you like, or any sort of thing like that, as far as like little monthly PatternLab updatey things?
Yeah, I had a few examples that I wrote down. I'm not a visual learner from video very well, but I do have some articles that I have saved from last time, and I can compile any of that stuff that you may be interested in. There are a few videos online. They're kind of old because when Pattern Labs and Drupal first came out, it was like 2016, and it was all the rage, and then everybody kind of went away from it. So what we're doing is almost like a resurrection of Pattern Labs with Drupal, which makes it kind of interesting. When we first started this project, there was nothing for Drupal 9. So everything that we wrote on our project for Robert Half, it's all original. Like, we wrote the theme from the ground up, every single bit of it, which was kind of a challenge because at first we were going to use Bootstrap, and then the more and more that we get into our project, the less we only use it for like grids and margins and padding, and that's about it. And that was kind of one of those things where we had to make a decision on, but there wasn't anything. There was like the newest like GitHub or GitLab public repo I could find was like 2017 or something like that. So everything that we've done is kind of paved the way for our team. And we just chose Pattern Labs because of the atomic design nature. And it was something that everybody was comfortable with learning, since it basically doesn't deviate too far from the skills that we were already bringing on board. Now, our next project in the future, we may use something completely different, but the one we're working on now is kind of a proof of concept so that we can show that our team is capable of taking on more of Robert Half's in-house websites. Am I correct in that, Wendy, Ricky? You guys have been there longer than I am, but I feel like this stuff was kind of outsourced first, and then we brought it in-house. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, it's correct. What something that I would like to add is that at Robert Half, we wanted to adopt or try this the atomic design methodology in a search of improving the reusability and consistency across the site. We had as experience in a previous project that we built in Drupal, we noticed that there were so many things that were amazing and could be implemented in a component base. And because it was not taking this direction, that development was used only once. And we realized that there are plenty of inconsistency in the past project. So we wanted to encourage to the team to the reusability, and also have for the designers. So we had to have some meetings and with the team, with the designers, to let them understand a little bit what was going to be the way that we will be work, so they can be conscious as well, and in the same time that about consistency, and try to reuse whatever buttons or whatever concept that it's considered as atom. We have to explain to them about this methodology, so they were able to have this idea of atoms, components, and atoms, molecules, organisms, and templates, so they can reuse and generate the mockups following this pattern. And based on that, so we had to have reviews and breaking down every mockup on, okay, this can be following the mockups that we receive. We can see that this part can be reused, and it has to be consistent across all the screens that we have receiving. So this definitely has to be an atom. This has to be a molecule, because it has to be the same behavior and the same UI. So it has to be a molecule. So then, because we have the molecule, we can reuse in an organism, and those organisms can then be reused across the different templates and pages. But yeah, that was the main idea, or the main thing that encourages a team to adopt PatternLab was encourage the reusability and keep consistency, and try to reuse those components that we build, explore more about reusability.
It seems like the opportunities to make theme more and more decoupled are really exciting in the process. When you look at some of the major government sites and health sites, or more and more of the aspects that Drupal is consuming are actually not really in Drupal anymore, and then you put your database over there and your APIs over there, then it starts, you kind of want that theme coming in from a third-party source and becoming more distributed out beyond Drupal, out to, into your mobile devices, and so it takes Drupal out of the niche, means that Drupal isn't going to be having to supply all those elements out to everyone, and kind of takes that traffic and that exposure out over here. It looks like a really great direction. So yeah.
I think that's a fair assessment, because whenever I came on board, there were only a handful of Drupal developers at Robert Half, and I think some of you guys were repurposed from other departments, if I recall. Like I remember my first interview was with Wendy, and you guys know Andre, Angela, and Tony. And he was basically like, "Do you know how to use PatternLabs?" And I was like, sort of. I learned it at DrupalCon in like 2016. He goes, "Okay, you're hired." And I was like, "What? I don't know anything about PatternLabs. What are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, truth be told, we're going to explore atomic design together, but we need someone to help tie that gap with Drupal, because there's a lot of misconception with what you can and can't do with Drupal, and it's really that there's nothing you can't do with Drupal. You just have to learn how to do it." And so it's been a project for about 6 months. I've been on the project, and I think half of our team came from other disciplines, and then the other half of us, I know a couple of the guys are Acquia certified, and then I have no certifications other than experience. But it's like you said, Will, we brought together from way different, not just backgrounds, but just different philosophies of doing stuff, and put it all into one team. And like, for what we've done in 6 months, I can't believe, like, it's been crazy, because you've got half of the people that never even saw Drupal until January of 2021. And now we're writing modules and theme hooks when we need to, and being able to apply the different JavaScript and headless type stuff, which we're going to get more into after this project. So it's interesting.
Also remember the opportunity of have a separate, because PatternLab runs in a different independently of the Drupal. So what we are trying to do is generate our own library when we have the opportunity to work in an interesting component that could be reused, or could be a good option for displaying a specific information. And we have nice UI and nice animations, so that component can be placed in a separate gallery, and we can definitely reuse for a different project. So that's another benefit of using PatternLab.
Yeah, that's true. Our first 3 months, we had a standalone PatternLab that we didn't use Drupal at all, because we didn't have the specs from the designer. So the first couple of months was Wendy and I just kind of banging out different patterns to put in the PatternLab so that we could reuse them later. And we've used a handful of them from our global PatternLab. We haven't touched that project in a while, but it was useful because it got everybody used to using the PatternLab, and then came the integration into Drupal, which was nice. So it helped bridge a gap and get everyone on board. But we can also use those components separately for other projects. I know that there are some projects that I don't work on there that are Salesforce and other things, and I don't know that you're using PatternLabs on any of that right now, but I could see you guys going that direction. I know that Wendy does a lot of our front end development for Salesforce as well, and that's completely different than Drupal, but she can use stuff she's already made.
It is different. So in the case of Salesforce, as we have currently, it's different, but definitely the atomic design is something that can be adopted, and it doesn't have to be specifically of Drupal, more than we are trying to explore as well the React components. So if we can build components that can work with React, think of this. So those components can work more than in Drupal. Just in Drupal projects can be applied on different projects as well. But in Salesforce currently, so we build in component space, but it's a little different than what we have in the Drupal, but definitely it can be. So I see this atomic design like more like a methodology on how you can organize your UI elements and then make your Lego blocks, and then you can build more and more complex
Yep.
things. And about the branding, colors, and the alignments and all those things, you can handle it easily. So you can grab your component and take it, put it in the different project that you need, and just change the styling to make it work. Yeah.
How was the, Wendy, how was the acceptance from the point of view of the designers when you were trying to get them to think in terms of reusability? Given the fact that they think in terms of, colors, lines, textures, or whatever, right? From a developer's point of view, you have to think in terms of structured language, right? How did that go over with them?
It has been, honestly, it has been a challenge, but so when we explained to the design team how this methodology work, they were agree, they like it, actually, they like it. And especially because we explained to them that if we follow this, we will be able to create a library of components. So mockups at the first stage of the project is going to take more time, but with the time it's going to be less time, because this methodology encourages to reuse. So basically with the time we will have a library with plenty of components that they can just pick and put.
She got an email and then all of a sudden it froze.
I was gonna say it's probably PatternLab is great for that. Like for a team, like if you're a solo freelancer, you might not get as much if you're doing just a single project. But if you're working with a team and like continuously developing a site, like from some of the other projects we worked at Robert Half, like we didn't use PatternLabs, and I found myself like constantly like rebuilding like the tiniest components because I couldn't find like where exactly we had the stats file that I needed to include, or it was a lot of repeated code. Not only with that, but we have a team like global team, so people around the world, and sometimes like different time zones. You don't communicate as well. With this, everybody knows you're working on this one component, and then that's what you're including, and it's easy to see, it's easy to share across like from the designers all the way to like front end and also back end developers. So it's like very integrated, like a lot more integrated than it was before, at least is what I see. Even though I'm not working on it day to day with D, but yeah.
We did use your JavaScript today to fix the load more button, so he did participate a little bit.
A little bit.
Karuna had a different problem than Rajat, and they both asked me how to fix it, and I was like, I don't know how to fix it. So, but we did. We got on a call with Jajit, and so that's the power there of like that one component that we built together is being reused for other parts of that website now. And so it was cool to see that because we didn't have to write the function over and over and over and over again. We made it class-based, and so all you have to do is add that class. If you want to load more button, it's just going to work no matter what the items are that it's trying to load. So it was improved upon today at the end of day. So kudos, Ricky. Thanks for help on that one. But yeah, that helps. That's an example right there of working across different time zones and being able to pick up on the same component and get things done quickly. I don't know what happened to Wendy, but I'm willing to take more questions. I've got a little more time. If anybody has anything. If not, I thank you guys for coming. I hope this was educational, and you can ask me in the Slack channel questions after this, and if you need links, I can provide links as well.
Thanks, Lee. It's awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. I really enjoyed watching that. I know it was a bit difficult for you because you were in flux, but it was really worthwhile.
It'll be more improved. We might do another extension of this later. Give me a month or so to kind of write my own, improve my own. I do intend to use this repo that I've created at some point as like a base theme that people can pull it down and use it for their own projects. I'm trying not to make too many assumptions. Right now it's Bootstrap based, but you don't necessarily have to use Bootstrap. I try to make things where they don't assume too much, and so it'll be fairly bare bones, but feature rich when I get done with it.
Bit nitpicky, but would you consider going with Gulp instead of Grunt? A lot of people seem to prefer that these days.
Yeah, I cut my teeth on Gulp. It was just that some of the examples I was using, or some of the examples I found already had really nicely scripted grunt files. But yeah, no, not an issue. I'm used to both.
I was thinking in terms of like if you're sharing a repo, you might get greater receptivity if you went with Gulp. So just a thing.
Let's see. I'm going to send that Slack link. I'm going to send that to, actually, somebody, if y'all don't mind, send me an invite to the Slack link so I can send it to Wendy.
I think it's there in the chat. If
I
you
was
go to
trying
the
to
chat,
copy
it's
it.
there.
There we go. Teams is being goofy. There we go. Lost the window somehow. Oh, there it's back. I think that's a success. If anybody else has any questions, line them up. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
You're not getting away that easy, but we will see you in the future, sir.
No, I won't get away that easy because, I mean, you guys are going to rip me apart right after this in the Slack channel. I know it. I just feel it. But
did you see
cool.
how he moved his mouse? It was so jerky. I mean, his mouse was all over the place. Like, all right, sir. You did a great presentation. Thank you very much for doing two for us. That was awesome.
And hopefully 3 as well, right, Lee?
Yeah, I'll do a third. I'll do my homework a little better this time. I wanted to show a little bit more of a demo, but I think I got the point across today, and maybe we can build on that demo next time and show like actual dynamic use of variables and passing things from Drupal into the PatternLab templates and so forth.